So I reviewed the NECA Toys Spider-Man Homecoming 1/4 scale Spider-Man, and a viewer in the comments section said, would you consider reviewing him and comparing him with the Hot Toys Spider-Man Homecoming figure? Yeah, I can do that. Now, obviously, this may serve to be a somewhat ridiculous video of, obviously, scale-wise. One is drastically bigger than the other, but for you guys, the viewers out there, we're going to do a comparison between the NECA Toys, like I said, Spider-Man Homecoming 1/4 scale Spider-Man on your left, and obviously the bigger one, to the one on the right, which is the Spider-Man Homecoming from Hot Toys. Let's, for the sake of argument, grab the tape measure here and figure out how tall they are from one another. The 1/4 scale Spider-Man, if you recall correctly, stands at a very impressive 17 inches in height, while the Spider-Man Homecoming from Hot Toys stands a little shy of being 12 inches in height. Size, obviously, is the big difference between the two figures, but you will notice as well, between looking at the smaller Hot Toys now being dwarfed and the taller NECA version, that the colors are actually drastically different from one another as well. The Spider-Man from NECA here has a very different sort of color palette to it. And now we actually compare it to the one that's from Hot Toys. The blue, for example, looks like something similar to Christopher Reeve's Superman costume, where before it looked like a slightly more darker blue. I think one of the big differences as well is the red. The red comes across now almost like a orangey tomato ketchup red on the left versus the more darker, vibrant red on the right here. Now, don't be too alarmed. I've gone ahead and just ripped the head off. I didn't rip it off, but I detached the head from the socket area of the much taller Spider-Man here to do a better comparison between the two here. Of course, NECA is on the left, obviously, and Hot Toys is on the right here. We're going to overlook for the fact that the NECA one is plastic, the Hot Toys one is plastic but is covered in fabric, and solely look at them from a sculpt level. I will admit, and I'm looking at it from the side here, profile-wise, you know what, we'll just tip the head up a little bit so we can give a fair representation. Profile-wise, I think NECA might have a slightly better head sculpt. It seems shaped a little bit better. The one thing that gets lost on this Spider-Man, I can feel it in there. There are his ears, but the NECA one definitely seems to be a little bit more deliberately, showing the sticking out of the ears just a little bit more. Now, you could use the argument that if this was obviously plastic, you would get a better representation of the two figures. So again, we're only doing this fun sort of comparison because you guys wanted to see it. So I thought, you know what, we'll do the review of it. To NECA's also credit as well, this is now something I'm looking at here, the eyes. If you look at NECA's and you slightly tip it, you can see that the lens is made up of almost two layers. You have the outer clear lens. I'm going to put Spider-Man down here for a second. You almost have like an outer clear lens, and then inside that, it almost seems further down, you've got the honeycomb, white honeycomb plastic inside. If you look at Hot Toys, however, Hot Toys just had one plastic that was slightly given that same sort of texturing, but it's not actually to the same level that NECA's is. Now, you may very well find that across the board, Hot Toys may score better, but I will say, to NECA's credit, I think there's more depth to the actual white portion of his eyes versus than what we got here with the Hot Toys release. Does it not seem as if there's actually a little bit more, just a little bit more depth to those actual eyes? The outer area of the eyes are almost identical to one another. Hot Toys favors a little bit more of a darker black versus NECA, which now comes across a little on the lighter side now that I'm looking at the two. Webbing, I may give it to the Hot Toys release. But I think I like the shape, the head shape, a little bit better than on NECA's than I do on Hot Toys release. It almost seems underdefined on Spider-Man's head here, and I think it seems better designed here. Although, again, the webbing isn't as good. Texturing also has the same sort of basketball, I use the term basketball, but the basketball sort of texturing here on the head. It gets a little lost on NECA's. Hot Toys gets a little bit, sees a little bit more of that detail shining through. Obviously, one big problem I still have with this figure is that seam. Like, why did they have to put the seam right there? It's literally right there for me to look at. They probably could have put the seam further back here, or there's definitely a little bit more of a bulge happening here. But I don't feel as much the ears. The nose, I get a little bit happening here, but I may give points overall to NECA's release. Granted, one being plastic, one's covered in fabric. But I think NECA, in all honesty, gave us a better looking head. It's not to say that the paint is good, but I think the head sculpt as well as the eyes do better on this release than this one right here. We'll look at the two torsos now. And again, I think coloring is where the Hot Toys excels. Somebody's going to say down below, you really can't compare a fabric costume to plastic. And again, I get that. We're just going to have a little bit of fun comparing the two here. The Spider-Man symbols are very much identical to one another. Hot Toys does, however, have the additional almost diamond shape underneath the spider emblem here, which carries its way into the web. NECA's doesn't seem to have that. Instead, they've just got the one line running through it. There may be a slight outline, but at the very least, it doesn't panel line it almost to the degree that the Hot Toys one does. I also am looking at the fact that the shoulders here on the NECA's, the black, now that I'm seeing it here, the black abruptly stops. You'll see on this one, it carries up onto the shoulders and then drops down, and still a full finished connected line, and then runs its way down to the torso. This one here, and a lot of that could be chalked up to its posability, being able to move the hinge out on the arm, but it does abruptly stop. There's this little cut right here where it stops and it doesn't continue on. The torsos are roughly the same. There's not really a whole much different with them. NECA's is slightly more elevated when it comes to the panel lining on their torso. Hot Toys relies more so on the printing. So you've got the blue panel lining, but it's not raised from the surface. NECA's, on the other hand, does very obviously stick out from the rest of the mold here. Belts are almost identical to one another. Little cleaner, obviously, on the Hot Toys. I say obviously, it's not necessarily a case of obvious, but a little cleaner here presented on the Hot Toys than it was on the NECA. Paint gets a little on the sloppy side happening right here, but you've still got the capsules on either side. Speaking of also capsules, the web shooters, a little bit more detailed here on the Hot Toys release. If we look at the one that came with the Spider-Man Homecoming, the NECA release, I should say, though it is flipped around, there's no silver. There's no added silver, and there's also that little capsule added to the end there. The NECA one, I should say, has left that completely off. One other thing actually that comes to my attention looking at the two here is the very drastic body molds, the body builds between the two. Spider-Man here has very broad shoulders. NECA, on the other hand, does have broad shoulders, but they're a little bit more curved down. And if you look at his body actually has just more of a rectangular shape to the torso. The head is also slightly larger, which unfortunately NECA, or the Hot Toys release one right here, doesn't seem to have. I may very well, and may get some hate for saying this, but I may very well say that NECA gives proportionately a better body mold, body shape that is, than what we got here with the Hot Toys. It also seems as well that the logo, the spider logo on the back of the NECA release here, is bigger. proportionally is bigger to its torso versus the smaller one on the Hot Toys. And the Hot Toys, actually, if you look at it, seems longer and a little skinnier. NECA's here seems wider and a little shorter. A lot of this is all personal opinion, but I think I actually might have given points more so on the logo on the back here to NECA's release versus the Hot Toy release. I know I'm squeezing Spider-Man's tush here. It does stick out quite a bit. I guess NECA's really doesn't have that. You've got a bit of the spider butt happening here, and it's just only due to the nature of the figure that they've got underneath here. They just so happen to give him a bit of a spider butt. I really have to stress this, though. By no means is this really a comparison. I know it sounded like a comparison over the course of this video of comparing one to the other. Two are made, well, each one is made by a completely different company, and the mediums are completely different as well. One is obviously using a plastic, one is using a plastic frame covered in fabric. But it did make for a fun comparison between, comparing the larger scale NECA to the smaller Hot Toys. Let me know down below, guys, what you think is the better figure. Keeping, of course, in mind that one is plastic, one is fabric. I will say, to the credits of Hot Toys, the outfit looks better. The colors, I think, are a little bit more vibrant and accurate to the movie Spider-Man. NECA's now almost comes across a little bit off color. The orangey reds are very much more apparent and more visible now that we're comparing it to the Hot Toys release. The blues are also slightly off. But I think, to the credit of NECA, proportionately, I think it fits looking more like Spider-Man. I think it looks more like a teenage body underneath the costume here versus what we got here with the Hot Toys. I think the head sculpt is also perhaps a little bit more superior. And one thing that NECA delivered that Hot Toys couldn't have delivered was the better lenses on the eyes. As you saw with the lenses, those lenses seem as if there's some depth to it. You've got the clear over the top, and then you've got the meshing or the webbing eye texturing underneath. It definitely does seem like there's two layers happening here. And Hot Toys here on the right didn't have that. So, an interesting comparison. One obviously is a little bit more expensive than the other, but the 1/4 scale Spider-Man, I think in stores, works out to be about $120, about a little over the ones, and then of course you've got tax on top of that. The Hot Toys release of Spider-Man is about $230, $240, and then of course tax and shipping on top of that as well. So it's safe to say that the Hot Toys is about $100, just a little over $100 difference if you go with this route than this route here. The sizing, of course, is drastically different from one another, but let me know down below, guys, which do you think, not factoring in the size, but let's say the size were the same, which do you think performs and ends up coming across with a better Spider-Man? Is it the NECA here on the left, or is it the Hot Toys on the right? Interested to hear your comments and your thoughts down below. Again, a bit of a silly comparison. I know, comparing one higher end collectible versus one released from NECA, but interested in hearing your thoughts down below. Today we were having a comparison look at the NECA 1/4 scale Spider-Man Homecoming and the 1/6 scale release of the Spider-Man Homecoming from Hot Toys. As always, guys, thanks for watching, as you always do. More videos will be coming your way. I'll see you guys next time.